Around 3,200 years ago, the Eastern Mediterranean was the glowing center of the known world. It was a true golden age. Powerful empires, the Egyptians, the Hittites, the Mycenaeans, and the Babylonians, ruled over vast, tamed landscapes. They built monumental palaces that scraped the sky, mastered the art of writing, and established complex trade networks that stretched across continents. They traded shining bronze, pure gold, lapis lazuli, and exotic spices. Kings called each other brother in their diplomatic letters, sending royal gifts across the sea. Peace and prosperity seemed eternal. The world was interconnected, globalized in a way that humanity wouldn't see again for millennia. But this intricate web of civilizations was completely fragile. In just a few decades, the rhythm of progress would violently stop. Almost every major city in the region would be burned to the ground or completely abandoned. Centuries of writing systems would be forgotten. The vibrant trade would vanish into ash. The world was standing on the edge of an absolute abyss. What could possibly bring down the greatest empires of antiquity simultaneously? Was it the wrath of nature, a rebellion from within, or a terrifying, unknown force emerging from the sea? This is the mystery of the late Bronze Age collapse, the night the ancient world ended. To understand how the ancient world fell, we first need to understand how it stood. The late Bronze Age was an era of unprecedented globalization. The superpower states of the time were heavily dependent on one another. The lifeblood of this era was bronze, but bronze requires copper and tin, materials rarely found together. Copper was heavily mined in Cyprus, while tin had to be imported from as far away as modern-day Afghanistan. This geological inconvenience forced ancient empires to cooperate. They built a massive, intricate network of trade routes spanning thousands of miles. Archaeologists discovered the Uluburun shipwreck, a merchant vessel that sank off the coast of Turkey over 3,000 years ago. Its cargo was a perfect microcosm of this ancient global economy. Egyptian gold, Canaanite jars, Baltic amber, and raw ox-hide ingots of copper and tin. Kings exchanged diplomatic letters written on clay tablets, discussing trade, political alliances, and even royal marriages. They operated like a massive family of empires. But this deep interconnectedness was a double-edged sword. When your survival relies entirely on international trade, you thrive together, but you also risk dying together. If one single node in this complex system fails, if a trade route is cut or a kingdom falls, the entire web begins to violently shake. The first cracks in this golden age didn't come from enemy swords. They came from the sky and from deep beneath the earth. Climatologists analyzing ancient pollen and ice cores have uncovered a grim truth. Around 1200 BC, the Mediterranean was hit by a severe, multi-decadal megadrought. The life-giving rains simply stopped. Rivers turned to mud, and vast fields of wheat withered and died under a merciless sun. For empires that relied on feeding massive populations of workers and armies, this was catastrophic. Famine spread like a plague. Clay tablets from the Hittite capital, Hattusa, contained desperate pleas to neighboring kings. It is a matter of life and death. Send grain. But the sky wasn't their only enemy. The earth itself began to violently shake. Modern geologists believe the region experienced an earthquake storm, a series of massive seismic events ripping through tectonic fault lines over a 50-year period. Major cities like Mycenae, Tyrants, and Troy were repeatedly leveled by violent tremors. Defensive walls cracked, magnificent palaces collapsed, and critical infrastructure was reduced to rubble. The interconnected trade network couldn't cope with simultaneous natural disasters. When you are starving and your cities are falling apart, you stop trading bronze and start fighting for bread. The delicate balance was broken. Driven by hunger and fear, the desperate masses began to migrate, searching for survival. As famine and earthquakes shattered the foundations of the Bronze Age, a new, terrifying threat emerged from the horizon. The Egyptian records call them the Sea Peoples, a mysterious, heavily armed confederation of raiders arriving on fleets of ships. Who were they? Historians still debate their origins. Some believe they were refugees fleeing the droughts in the Aegean in southern Europe, driven by desperate hunger to take what they needed. Others suggest they were displaced mercenaries, pirates, or a massive migration of entire tribes. They brought their families in ox-drawn carts, signaling they weren't just raiding. They were looking for a new home. But their arrival was apocalyptic. They swept through the Mediterranean like a swarm of locusts. Unlike the formal, chariot-based armies of the great empires, the Sea Peoples fought a brutal, asymmetrical war. They used long swords, javelins, and swarmed the heavy chariots, pulling warriors to the ground. The great empires, already weakened by nature, were completely unprepared for this chaotic, decentralized infantry assault. The Sea Peoples didn't just conquer, they erased. They burned down centuries-old cities, destroyed trade ports, and slaughtered the elites. The fear they inspired was absolute. In Ugarit, a wealthy port city in modern Syria, a desperate final letter was found in the ruins. The enemy's ships came here. My cities were burned, and they did evil things in my country. The letter was never sent. The city was destroyed before the clay could dry. When a highly interconnected system fails, it doesn't just break, it cascades. This is the domino effect. As the Sea Peoples raided the coasts and earthquakes shattered the infrastructure, the fragile trade network simply evaporated. Without copper from Cyprus or tin from the east, the production of bronze completely stopped. The lifeblood of the empires dried up. In Greece, the great Mycenaean civilization, the heroes of Homer's epics, collapsed. Their magnificent palaces at Mycenae, Pylos, and Tiryns were abandoned or put to the torch. Even the legendary city of Troy fell, caught in the chaos of this apocalyptic era. Was it the Trojan War of myth, or just another victim of the Great Collapse? Across the Aegean, the mighty Hittite Empire, which had ruled Anatolia for 5 centuries, faced total annihilation. Their capital, Hattusa, an impenetrable fortress city, was abandoned and burned. An entire superpower, one that had rivaled Egypt, simply vanished from the map. The kings were dead, the scribes were gone, and the people fled into the mountains. This wasn't just a military defeat. It was a total systems collapse. When the palaces burned, the complex bureaucracy that managed food, trade, and law burned with them. The lights of civilization were going out, one by one, plunging the ancient world into a deep, terrifying darkness. As the world burned around them, only one superpower remained standing, the mighty Egyptian Empire. In 1177 BC, Pharaoh Ramses III looked toward the Mediterranean Sea and saw the apocalypse approaching. The Sea Peoples, having destroyed the Hittites and the Mycenaeans, now set their sights on the wealth of the Nile. Ramses knew he could not fight them on the open water. Instead, he laid a brilliant, desperate trap. He allowed the enemy fleet to enter the treacherous mouths of the Nile Delta. There, the heavy ships of the Sea Peoples became stuck in the shallow, muddy waters. Suddenly, from the riverbanks, hidden Egyptian archers unleashed a devastating storm of arrows. Egyptian infantry then closed in, turning the battle into a slaughter. Ramses had saved Egypt. The reliefs carved into the walls of his temple at Medinet Habu proudly declare a total victory. But it was a hollow triumph. The immense cost of the war, combined with the collapse of international trade and the ongoing droughts, fatally crippled the Egyptian economy. The pharaoh's treasury was empty. The empire survived the battle, but it would never again reach its former glory. The Bronze Age had officially died, taking its greatest civilizations down with it into the dust. The collapse was absolute. Following the fall of these magnificent empires, the Mediterranean plunged into a period known as the Dark Ages. For centuries, populations shrank, monumental buildings ceased, and the very art of writing was completely forgotten. The intricate global web of the Bronze Age was replaced by isolated, struggling villages. But from the ashes of this apocalypse, a new era was quietly being forged. Deprived of the copper and tin needed for bronze, humanity was forced to look for alternatives. They found it in a material that was much harder to work, but infinitely more abundant: iron. Unlike bronze, which required complex international trade networks, iron could be mined and forged almost anywhere. It was the democratization of tools and weapons. This terrifying collapse wasn't just an end, it was a necessary reset. Without the fall of the Bronze Age titans, the classical civilizations of Greece and Rome, and eventually our modern world, might never have existed. Today, as we look at our own deeply interconnected global economy, the echoes of 1177 BC serve as a haunting reminder. Complexity brings prosperity, but also profound fragility. The ancient world fell because it could not adapt to a perfect storm of climate change, migration, and systemic failure. The question is, if our web starts to tear, are we ready for what comes next?